I'm here at the first CIY mix of the summer. This is the first CIY event since March of 2020. It's been 451 days since we've seen a room full of students. And I can't tell you how good it is to be back at events. I'm calling donors, people who supported us over the last year. Hey, can you hear me? Hey, Brenna, how are you? Because I wanted to show them what they helped protect. What's going on? There he is. First CIY event since March 7th, 2020. So I wanted to take you inside the room and just kind of show you what you preserved. Let me show you. We started just a little bit ago.
Let's go. I am so excited.
We're here tonight because of folks like you, and that means a whole lot to us.
It means a lot to me too. How many kids are there?
I'm going to guess 200 to 300. Because of your sacrifice and your contributions to our ministry, you made tonight happen, and we're really grateful for that.
Well, it's our pleasure. We know CIY is doing great things.
We're doing it together. I'm sorry. We're just very grateful. I mean, to think about where we were last June 1 to where we are now.
Amazing.
I mean, it's because of people like you who just stepped in and said, we got your back. I can't believe we're going to have a summer. It means so much.
Well, I'm grateful for what you do, and so thank you.
I'm so happy for you guys. This is going to be so great. I'm so glad events are back. Thank you to all the staff of CIY for making these type of things happen.
Thanks for sticking with us. Appreciate you a whole bunch, man. You guys say hi to Ed. Thanks, man. Really grateful for you. We'll talk to you soon. We believe we're just getting started. Tens of thousands of students will experience the call to kingdom work this summer. Our donors protected that. They had our backs this past year. They preserved the kingdom worker moments we're all so passionate about. But as we look ahead, my question to you is, will you help propel us forward? We've come a long way, but there's still work to be done. Help us move forward together. The truth is, I could have called every single one of you. I didn't have your number, though, but I could have. So I'll take this opportunity right now to extend that gratitude and that thankfulness to you this morning. As we approach now the end, very close to the end of a CIY summer, my heart is still just as full as it was back in early June. It is an honor to steward these kingdom worker moments that have happened. It is an honor to partner with churches like C3. And so whether you've been around here a while, or whether you just showed up, or if you've sent your own kids to CIY events, or you just haven't, can I tell you this, that we really do exist to serve the local church. But we learned this past 15 months or so that CIY very practically exists because of the local church. So thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for partnering with us. I had the chance to be with your church, your students back in Tennessee earlier this summer, and it was a joy to experience what God is doing through CIY together. Now, you remember when you were a kid or when you were younger and something embarrassing happened to you, and an adult in your life said, don't worry about it. You won't remember it when you grow up. It turns out they were lying to us. I played football all 4 years of high school. And if that surprises you based upon how I look or how I carry myself, then you would not be surprised to know that I wasn't the best player on any field. The truth is, I just could not hang muscle on my 15-year-old frame. I was basically all neck and teeth until I was about 20 years old. Built like a selfie stick a decade before we knew what selfies were. Right? But I enjoyed my time on the football field. I enjoyed being a part of the team. I worked hard every day. I showed up to practice. I put in the work. I spent time in the weight room. I learned a lot. I carried a lot of life lessons from that. And by the time I was a junior or senior, I had made the varsity team. I lettered my last 2 years of high school. I am thankful for my experience of playing football at Muskogee High School. However, There was a night, there was a play, a moment that now 20 years later, I still continue to think about, I still go back to. I was a freshman. I was playing on the JV team. It was a Monday night, and we were playing up the road in Miami, Oklahoma, against Miami High School. I remember that particular night, I was playing on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't typically play defense, but maybe they needed some help, so they put me on the defensive side of the ball, playing free safety. Now, if you know much about football strategy, and if you know even more about that level of football, you know that the free safety is not the most important position on a field. In fact, really, the design of a free safety is like, just go stand in this area, and just stay there. And if any action comes your way, then you can get involved. But otherwise, just be out there. And so there I was, playing free safety, just doing my best, just being out there. I was a little bit like a dad in a delivery room. Like, I knew what was going on, but I was not very much help. So there I was, just kind of out there in the defensive backfield. And then it happened. So it was late in the game, late in the fourth quarter, under 2 minutes to go. Miami had the ball. We had a 4-point lead. And I remember they were working their way down the field as time continued to tick off. And then it happened, the play that I have thought about for years. It was fourth down. It's more dramatic if it's fourth down, right? We'll say it was 4th down and 8. And I remember standing back there watching the play unfold where the quarterback took the ball, took 3 steps back, and then had some pressure from his left side. So he rolled around out of the pocket, and as I was standing back there backpedaling, minding my own business, protecting the space, I watched the tight end run a slant pattern across the field into my area. Cut to the quarterback rolling to his right, seeing a potential play unfold in front of him, but because of the pressure, he had to throw the ball off of his back foot, meaning that the ball hung a little longer than he wanted it to, right in my direction. And so I stood there and watched the ball float up into the air and did this. And it's almost as if it happened in slow motion. I watched the ball float into the air, dance in the lights, coming right toward me. So I stuck my hands up, and then I watched as the ball, in a loose spiral, fall into my hands, and then fall through my hands. And then I watched as the ball hit my face mask. And then, to my shock and dismay, I watched as the ball then started going in the other direction, right back up into the air from which it came. And then I watched the ball fall effortlessly into the arms of the tight end, who caught the ball and fell down. First down. I was just so irritated. I can't believe I blew it. And I remember unstrapping my helmet and jogging over to the sidelines and standing down at the end, like as far away from the coach as I could be. And I just, my gosh, Eric, how could you? You're just so stupid. How could you do something like that? Was your moment. But you blew it. Like, you literally let the ball slip through your fingers. How could you do it? Now, I recognize this is not the type of story you tell on a Sunday morning. This isn't the big hoorah, go get 'em speech, but it's true. And perhaps it's relevant because I can't tell you the number of times I've had similar moments where I could stand up and deliver and make the play, and for whatever reason, I just wasn't able to. Hey, it's one thing if it's a JV football game in Miami, Oklahoma in the late 90s, but it's another thing when the stakes are higher, when it's a job, when it's a relationship, when it's a marriage, when it's a relationship with a kid, when it's your own spiritual life or soul. Why is it that when the game is on the line, when the ball is coming right at me, I just can't seem to make the catch? If you're like me, then perhaps you read the words of Paul in Romans chapter 7, like me as well, and you understand what he's getting at when Paul writes this. In Romans chapter 7, Paul writes, I think we're going to see it on the screen. There it is. For I know the good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, no, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing. And when the ball is right there, right in front of us, what happens when we drop it? Hi, can you just hold this for me for just a second? Thank you very much. See how easy that is, right? So you spent the last few weeks unpacking this theme that we put together for Move this summer, for all, forever. And here's what I've come to understand, is that phrase is a big phrase, a daunting phrase, dare I say, a very inclusive phrase. And if we truly are to mean it, we truly are to believe that Jesus is for all, forever, that would mean that he is for us even when we drop the ball, even when we mess up. One of the best ways that I know of to understand how Jesus views me and how Jesus interacts with me is to watch and look at how he interacted with other people. And so you've had the chance to do that over the last several weeks, to look at interactions Jesus had with people, and it continues today as we look at Jesus' interaction with one of his closest friends, one of his closest followers, the Apostle Peter. So Peter was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, which means that Peter spent 3 years with Jesus, watching Jesus do all the things that we read about today. It blows my mind to think that everything that we read in Scripture that Jesus did, Peter would have had a front row seat to seeing it. Which means that when Jesus walked on water, Peter was there. And when Jesus healed people and fed people and clothed people, Jesus was there, or Peter was there. When Jesus turned water into wine, Peter was there. And if there was anybody then who you would think, man, this guy probably gets it right all the time, it had to have been Peter, because he was there, but he didn't. In fact, we read in Scripture that Peter got it wrong a lot of the time. Peter was the kind of guy that didn't think before he spoke. Peter was a blue-collar guy, a rough around the edges kind of guy. Peter was the kind of guy who you think, does he live in his truck? Like, I don't know where he lives. He doesn't have a mailing address, and there's a mattress in it. Does he live in his truck? Peter's the kind of guy that if he was your uncle, your mom would pull you aside before Uncle Pete arrived for Thanksgiving dinner, and she would say, remember, there are certain topics we don't bring up around Uncle Pete because we do not want to offend Grandma. Peter's the kind of guy who just has worn Crocs for the last 20 years, right? Like, they've kind of gone out of style and kind of they're back again, but he's still got his old ones from the early 2000s. Peter's the kind of guy that had a Sonic the Hedgehog tattoo that he's like really proud of, right? It wasn't a spring break mess up. No, he's really proud of this, right? This is Peter. And the truth is that Jesus likes guys like that. And so do I. And Peter spent 3 years with Jesus, watching him perform these miracles, watching him talk about the kingdom. And towards the end of Jesus' ministry, Jesus gathers his 12 disciples together in the upper room and says, okay, here's the deal, guys. The time has come for me to do what I've been sent to do. It's time for me to hand over my life to die on your behalf. And Peter, being the type of guy he was, would not stand for it and said, no, that's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen to you. And Jesus says to Peter, I imagine extremely patiently, says, Peter, you got to understand, man, this is the way that it has to be. No. In fact, if anyone tries to touch you or tries to hurt you, they're going to have to come through me first. Peter, I really appreciate that. But that's not the way this is going to go down. You see, I have to die. This is the way that die. No, listen. If no one's going to kill you. In fact, I would die before I let anything happen to you. And then Jesus says to Peter, Peter, you don't understand. In fact, I don't know how to say this, but like, The truth is, by the time the sun rises tomorrow morning, you will have denied me 3 times. This, of course, is news to Peter and stuns him. But flash forward to later that evening, Jesus calls his shot. And he is arrested while praying in a garden. And the Bible tells us that the authorities took him away, and his apostles, his disciples, followed at a safe distance. And they followed Jesus to the temple courts, where they moved Jesus throughout the night from one unfair trial to the next. And for the first time in Peter's life, he didn't want to be too close to the action. And so the Bible tells us that Peter stood out by a fire with a small crowd, just trying to stay warm, waiting to see if they could get any information, any news from what was happening in the courtroom. And the Bible says that there was a servant girl there, not with them, but recognized them. And in front of this small group of people, she notices Peter and thought, I think he was with Jesus. And she says, hey, you're with them, right? You're with Jesus. Peter, not trying to bring too much attention to himself, says, I'm sorry, I don't know who you're talking about. Yeah, see, I mean, you have the same accent. You sound just like him. I think you're one of those Jesus guys. I'm sorry. sorry. Listen, can you please just go stand somewhere else? I told you, I don't know him, okay? I'm just trying to stay warm. Can you please just... No, I'm not buying. He's a Jesus guy, everybody. He's a Jesus. And then Peter loses it and says, I told you, I don't know Jesus. And then the rooster crowed. And I imagine that at that moment, they pulled Jesus from one courtroom to the next. His hands are bound. And across a crowded courtyard, Peter's eyes meet Jesus's. And they both cry for very different reasons. Now, look, I've never yelled, I don't know Jesus, to a little girl, because that would be very strange. But I felt what Peter must have felt. Because there have been moments in my life where I felt like, okay, this is my moment, this is my time to shine, this is my opportunity, the ball is right there, and for whatever reason, it goes right through my fingertips. And there have been times that I have denied Jesus, maybe through my actions, or my words, or the words that I didn't say. But my question really is, what happens when my eyes meet Jesus' eyes in that moment? And what we do next literally defines everything. Because while Peter went away and cried, Jesus went to the cross. And in that moment, it wasn't so much about what Peter did, it was about what Jesus was going to do that defined what Peter was able to do next. And so, therefore, kingdom work is not about what you can do. Kingdom work is not about what you bring to the table and these great things you're going to do. No. Kingdom work is more about what Jesus has done than what he is calling you to do. And the truth is, Jesus is not really impressed with your gifts, with your abilities. In fact, they came from him. And at the same time, he is not overwhelmed or surprised by your shortcomings because he paid for them. And so therefore, I tend to understand the words of Paul a little bit in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul tells us this. He says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Kingdom work comes down to this. What will you do in response to what Jesus has done for you? A few months ago, my wife and our 2 girls Went to the zoo with our extended family, my brother and his wife and his kids, my parents. We spent a Saturday afternoon at the zoo, and we spent the whole day there. It was towards the end of the day. They were about ready to close the zoo down, and we walked, for hours already. And I remember we walked as a big group over to this platform, this dock that overlooked a pond in the middle of the Tulsa Zoo. We walked up onto the platform, and we're looking out across the water. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, Tori, my wife, says, whoa, this is strange. I just had one of those moments where I'm like, I remember this spot. This is like the spot of one of my earliest childhood memories. And we're like, okay, share. And she says, okay, so I was a little girl. I remember I was wearing sandals, and I'm standing on this dock, right here. And she said, and then all of a sudden, a snake came up out of the water, out of the little pond, and slithered across the dock and slithered across my foot and then went back into the water. And I was like a little girl, but I remember it just like it was yesterday. And we're like, that is a really strange and specific story, but okay. And so we listened and then went back to looking out over the water, looking for turtles and things like that. And then I had an idea. So I walked over to the side of the dock, and I found this little stick, right? And then I walked back over to Tori, who was preoccupied looking at the water, and she was wearing Chacos, which if you don't know what Chacos are, they are 13-pound sandals. And so I walked over to her, and I sneak up behind her, and I take the little stick, and I run it across the top of her bare foot. She instinctively does this. And the heel of her Chaco strikes me right here above my right eye. My glasses go flying. I go down to a knee. I'm holding my eye, thinking I'm just going to be blind forever. And I hear her say over the ringing of my head, well, he deserved it. And she wasn't wrong completely. So I'm taking a knee. I kind of start to stand back up, and when I do, I pull my hand off of my eye, and it is covered in blood, running down my arm, hitting the dock. It looked like a Tarantino film there in the zoo, and I go back to my knee, and I just go, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to see again. I can't see. And Tori then realizes that this is serious. And maybe I didn't deserve it fully. So they call the zoo security, and this woman runs over on a golf cart. She's coming down, and she's got this clipboard, and she's like, what happened, sir? And I'm like, my wife kicked me in the face. And she's like, okay, well, we got to get some bandages, and we got to do things. And here's a picture of the scene here. And so there I am. She's taking down the incident report form, which really is just one phrase, my wife kicked me in the face. And so we're there, and she's like, okay, we got to get you to an ambulance. And I'm like, ma'am, I don't need an ambulance. Please, we'll go to urgent care ourselves. And she says, okay. So she gets me onto the golf cart, and I'm like riding through the golf cart with bandages and gauze and blood all over me. And people are looking at me like, he got bit by a parrot. And we get to the parking lot, and we're, Googling urgent cares, which, by the way, if you ever have to go to an urgent care on a Saturday evening in a town you don't live in, 5 minutes before closing, you'll settle for just about anything. And I was like, please, let's find a good urgent care, not like an urgent care that's an urgent care and also a Subway sandwich shop. Let's find a good one. So they find one that's a couple of miles away, and my wife's driving me there. And she's saying to me a couple of times, hey, I don't think you deserved it, right? And I'm like, just get me to the urgent care. We'll talk about it later. So we get to the urgent care. We walk up to the front desk 2 minutes before they close, and they're like, sir, what happened? And I said, my wife kicked me in the face. So, okay, let's get you back to the room. They lay me back on the table. A nurse comes in. She says, sir, what happened? I said, my wife kicked me in the face. And then a nurse practitioner comes in. She says, sir, what happened? I said, my wife kicked me in the face. And then she said, well, aren't you glad it wasn't the other way around? And I said, no. And she said, okay, well, she pulled back my hand and looking at my wound, and she said the thing that you never want a medical professional to say when they're looking at you. She said, ooh, that's deep. And so 2 stitches later, I was on my way. Now, here's the truth. my wife is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, for real. On this planet, she just is a far and away number one. She is a partner in every sense of the word. She understands me like no one else does. She makes up for my weaknesses and has made me a better person for close to 20 years. But she is not Jesus at all. Because Jesus is never stunned. Jesus is never surprised. Jesus is never reactionary. Jesus would never say, when I do something stupid, well, he deserves it. Even when I do. Because instead of saying he deserves it, Jesus says, well, no, I've paid for it. And Jesus has this incredible ability to not just pay for it, but because of what he has done in one motion, not only redeems us, but propels us forward to kingdom work. My story, all those Monday nights ago in Miami, didn't end on the sideline. It ended in the game. I remember standing down at the end of the sideline as far away from the coaches as I could be, and I just was going over and over. I can't believe why did I just catch the ball, Eric? And as Miami continued to move the ball down the field, I remember my coach. He wasn't the best coach, but he got something right in that moment. Looking out on the field, said, "Epperson, where's Epperson?" And I say down at the other end, "I'm here, coach." "Well, what are you doing?" The ball went through my hands off, remember that? And he said, "Get back in the game." Okay. And I clipped my helmet back up and I ran out onto the field. And do you know who made the game-saving tackle on the 1-yard line? Kevin Reed. But I was in the game. Can I tell you this? That we have these moments in life where we think, well, that's it. That will define me for the rest of my life, and it never does, not in Jesus' eyes. And we think, well, I've messed it up big time. There's no way he can use me. And the truth is, Jesus looks at us and says, hey, get back in the game. Because your only qualification for kingdom work is what he has done, not what you have done or what you can do. And I have a feeling when we find ourselves just beating ourselves up on the edge of the sideline, Jesus looks at us and says, what are you doing? Get back in there. Because Peter's story didn't end around a campfire either. Well, it did, but see, there was another campfire, actually. The Bible tells us that Jesus was taken and he was arrested and he was crucified, but that wasn't it. He rose from the grave, and that's something like we really believe happened. But the apostles didn't know that's what's going to happen, or at least they didn't believe it. And so Peter and the other apostles just went back to work. I would imagine it would have been difficult. The guy you've been following for years, the guy you thought was going to be the Messiah, is killed, crucified. And not only that, you have a 3-year gap on your resume. I mean, what do you do from there? So Peter did what any of us would do. He just went back to the thing he knew. He went back to fishing. The Bible tells us that Peter's sitting out on a boat early one morning. He'd fished all night. He'd caught nothing. When he looked out on the shore and he saw a man who looked a lot like Jesus. He thought, he walks, he's got Jesus' gait. I think that's him. The Bible says that Peter was convinced of it and jumped into the water and swam to shore. And when he got to shore, guess what? It was Jesus. What an awkward moment that would have been, considering the last conversation. Jesus knew this, and so he did what made sense. He made breakfast. And the Bible tells us that Jesus and Peter sat down around another fire, and they made breakfast, and they ate fish together. And Jesus said, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? The Bible tells us that Jesus and Peter sat there, and Jesus began to ask Peter questions. Really one question, but 3 times. And so kind of out of nowhere, Jesus just says, hey, Peter, do you love me? Peter's like, well, yeah, of course I love you. And here's what Jesus was doing. So this sounds a little bit like Jesus was hinting at what Paul would later write in the book of Ephesians, specifically in Ephesians chapter 2. Paul writes this years later, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And so what's happening in this story is Jesus is saying, hey, do you love me? Because guess what? I love you. In fact, I just showed you how much I love you. And what I just did, Peter, what I just did was way more powerful than what you did or will do. But Jesus' grace for us is not just a saving grace. It doesn't just give us a do-over. No, his grace for us also compels and propels us to future kingdom work. And Paul continues this in the next verse, where Paul says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And so when Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yeah, I love you. Jesus is referring to not only the grace that we get, not only the forgiveness that we get through his resurrection, through his death and resurrection, but also the future plans that he gives us and the future good works that he puts in our path because of his grace and power. Peter says, yeah, I love you, of course. Jesus asked him again a few moments later, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, yeah, I do. They take another bite of fish and they stoke the coals and they sit there and watch the waves come back and forth. And then a moment later, Jesus asked Peter again, hey, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Yes. And when Jesus asks that, and we answer like Peter answers, I believe Jesus looks at every single one of us and says, okay, let's get back in the game.